Jason, what's up, man? Thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Ryan, thanks for having me. It's good to see you again, man.
Yeah, you too. I should have went back and looked to see when we initially did our podcast, but it must have been 3 years ago or so at this point.
I think it was like 2016.
Yeah, so 4 years ago, even longer. Well, lots
So I
changed
was
for you.
just
You got a
on
lot going
because
on, man.
I almost went on Skype instead of on Zoom because that's where the old call was. So I just saw the date. I cheated.
Yeah, that's actually the only thing we've done in the last 4 years is we've just moved from Skype to Zoom. That's the only thing we've done in order of man. That's different.
There's this bar close to us. It's called Pete's, right? And their motto is change nothing. Now,
Is that
they could make it's one of the world's great dive bars, right? Now, every once in a while, you might want to clean the bathrooms or put a fresh coat
Yeah.
of paint maybe somewhere.
Sure,
But other than
sure.
that, I understand the motto, right? If it's not broken, don't fix it. So I think what you're doing is awesome, and no need to change the technology. Change it a little bit. That's fine.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of nostalgia that comes with that as well. And, everything's like so fast, right? We're in this technologically driven world, even more so with COVID, right? Everybody's on Zoom and everything's digital and nothing's face to face anymore. And the further we go down that route, the more that we need to connect with people, the more that we need to maybe slow down a little bit and just appreciate what we have, be involved, move our bodies, exercise our minds, which is obviously in line with what you guys are doing with GoRuck.
I mean, I think we're in, to kind of expound on that, I think we're in a bad honeymoon with a bad marriage with this whole technology thing, right? I think there's kind of this period of, okay, we've got to do this. Let's be cyborgs and live behind the glass, behind our screens all day, every day. And it's so efficient, right?
Yes.
Like we're cyborgs. And, it's like the Terminator guarding John Connor by staying up all night, staring out the window because he doesn't need to sleep, right?
Right.
I mean, it's nice in theory, but it's not actually going to work out that well for us. And so what
Not
I
long
think
term anyways.
no, not long term. I mean, you can go to the well. And I think that what we're seeing is there's a lot of people out there who have pre-existing relationships, right? Pre-existing work relationships or whatever. And you're used to seeing those people online. Meanwhile, a dear friend of mine who's local, she comes into, friend of our families and stuff, she comes into the office and she started a new job and it's all virtual. It's a really different type of challenge,
Oh,
And so
yeah,
what
no
I'm
doubt.
seeing is I'm seeing a lot of people at the community level starving for kind of, let's get outside and go for a walk. You got people meeting neighbors and actually caring about their neighbors for the first time in a long time. You got people meeting up in parks to go do some PT or to have a picnic or to do some of the simpler things. So I'm just seeing this world that's really at odds in some ways. And I think that's good, right? Because there's this, hey, let's go have a picnic in the park. And then there's you're on a different time zone, 18-hour difference, whatever, right? And yet we can just stare at each other on the screen and pretend like anybody knows anybody else just because you're staring at them on a screen. And it's convenient and it's easy, but it's not going to fulfill us the same way. And so where that sort of clash is right now, I think we're all kind of fighting it a little bit and we're just trying to get through it and see where the dust settles. And I think it's going to settle on the side of people need to figure out how to spend some time in the real world outside with their friends. And the technology is certainly here to stay. So we have to learn how to live with it and embrace it, but not let it turn into just overruling us.
No, I think that's exactly right. It's a wonderful tool. I mean, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation. I wouldn't have the podcast. The reach that you have with your organization wouldn't be as large without the technology that we utilize. But if we let it become the master as opposed to we mastering the tool, I think that's where we run into the issue. So all it is a tool. It's a tool to be able to connect more. And I'll tell you, even in my experience, when I connect with people on Instagram or Facebook or through the web, whatever it may be, when we do actually get together face to face in person, it's that much better because we can cut right to it instead of all the little nuances and all the small talk because we already know a little bit about each other. And so it's just a tool that we're harnessing to connect on a deeper level when we do get face to face with people.
Yeah, since the beginning, we said we're at GoRuck, we're making real friends out of Facebook friends. And so I think if that's the model, I think that's a good model. If you start to let that justify or rationalize living online all day, every day, you're chasing the wrong stuff. Probably need to look a little closer to home, or figure out what your big goals are in life, or figure out how you're spending your time, right? I mean, show me your calendar and your bank account, and I'll tell you what really matters in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're, I mean, look at your phone, right? How many hours a day are you spending on your phone? It's there. It tracks it for you. You know, what's your step count?
I don't want to know.
What's your step count, right? I mean, it's in your phone, right? I mean, you know, are you taking care of yourself? Stuff like that. I mean, you can't cheat the physics of all of this. You can't run away from the basics, which are, if you live on your phone all day, you're probably not going to get it. You're not going to be outside enough. You're probably not going to, it's just a well that you're going to. And, you know, look, I'm not sitting here like, I have my phone, it's sitting right here. It's like kind of a leash, you know? So there's some discipline required to all of this. And yet, you know, that's the hardest thing for me to do, is to shut my brain off, right? Even when I'm with my family or with my kids, with M, unless I'm doing something that's physically kind of taxing, painful, or it's kind of the aftermath of something like that, it's really hard to kind of just flip that switch. And so the siren of the phone, which is just constant access to problems, right? There's lots of problems that I can find in my phone all the time, right? And then I can solve those problems, and that feels good.
You feel
sometimes they're the wrong problems, or they're too small. Yeah, or you're just, you know, you're bottom feeding, and chasing everything on your phone. It's like bottom feeding. If you want to be a shark, you can't just bottom feed all day long.
I never thought about that. It's almost like the path of least resistance. It's like going to these easy things, or arguing with somebody over a post, or over a definition of a word that you may have used that they don't like. Yeah, I've never really thought of it as bottom feeding, but that actually makes a lot of sense. Or you can consume yourself with solving high level problems that are meaningful and significant to you.
And it's very taxing on your brain, right? I mean, we don't know this while we're doing it, but it's very taxing when every 5 seconds there's a new something that it pops up. And that's what the algorithms are designed to do. It's always something new. Everyone's always got something new stuff, and you're kind of trying to process that, and it's not reality. And I say that, like, I have a massive amount of respect for, if you want to start a business, you need Facebook, you need Google, you need Amazon, you need all of these things that are, quote, free, right? There are free elements, maybe not Amazon, but there are free elements to Google and Facebook and Instagram and all these social platforms, and Zoom and Skype and all of these things. You can do so much to get it out there. Just make sure it's like, are you walking the dog, or is the dog walking you?
Right, exactly. You said something interesting, and I fall into this as well. I'm sure a lot of guys listening do too, that it's hard for you to shut your brain off. You always want to be active. You want to be solving problems. Is the catalyst and the origin of GoRuck, not the bags so much as the events, was that you getting out and wanting to shut it down and just be immersed in some physical and strenuous exercise? Is that a little bit of the catalyst, or is it something else?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the very beginning of GoRuck, I had no idea what I was doing. And so when you have no idea, no, let me rephrase that. I had no idea how to build a business. I had no idea how to communicate what I could communicate. I'd come from special forces. You're the quiet professionals. It doesn't mean silent, but it does mean quiet, right? Because it's not about you. And so what people in that industry, people in that profession, that trade of arms, what we don't like is when people get out and they make it all about them, because that's not what it's about. It was never all about you, ever. Not for once, not ever was it all about you. And you get someone who wins the Medal of Honor, and all they do is they're like, this is not about me. I mean, take that stuff to heart, right? The most decorated of us all are like, you get to that sort of Zen moment, and you know it even more, right?
Right.
And so I had to kind of make peace with how I could do something to fulfill to do something with my life at age 30-ish, right? It was going to be worthwhile where I could continue to give back. And that's what I knew. I'd spent a couple years designing and building the rucksacks, and, nobody wanted to buy them. And so I had a problem. I don't know anything about Facebook ads. I don't know anything about Google ads, nothing. Right. And in fact, I didn't even have those accounts. I think I joined Facebook relatively like 2008, 2009, maybe, but it was like not a thing for me ever. Right. And I didn't know anything about how to utilize those tools. I knew how to get out and whoop it on a little bit. And so that was just what I defaulted to. And that's, it was me living the life that I enjoyed, though. Even though at the time I was transitioning from the Army, so I was completely rejecting all the kind of, I don't want to do any of those hard things I had to do in the Army anymore. You always go, it's like you break up with one girl and you're
extreme,
like,
right?
Yeah, it's like I hated that girl, and so I'm going to go find the complete opposite, right? And it's just a train wreck, And so this was kind of the beginning of a really positive transition for me, was to get outside with other people. And I got to give back. I got to teach people about themselves. I got to teach people about life in special forces. I got to teach people about what the military is like, just a little bit, because I think it's very easy to talk about, there's such a huge divide between the military and civilian worlds. And it's just, speaking in absolutes like that, it doesn't really do it justice. There's lots of common ground that we all have. And so, people want to know about that stuff, especially at that time when, the wars were a lot more front and center. And I think, skirmishes, wars, whatever we want to call them, will always be front and center. I think it's always important for us to build bridges, not just divides.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. One of the things that I was really looking forward to talking with you about is in the book, and I've got it right here. You did a really good job explaining the highs and the lows. I mean, you get really personal, including sharing emails between you and your wife. And it's interesting because
my then soon to be future ex-wife, now.
That's right. Exactly.
Now, wife again.
What a crazy story. Yeah. I mean, it's just a crazy, crazy story. But here's the thing that I like about it, because we get requests and comments all the time from guys who say, I just want to hear from quote unquote ordinary guys. Now, what they're overlooking is that every person I've ever had on this podcast is an ordinary guy that has just decided to take some action and apply some of his skill sets or the things he's learned or his gifts and make himself something more. But I love that you highlight in the book and throughout your story that this isn't like everything that you touch turns to gold. In fact, you probably feel like it might actually be the opposite. And you do a great job documenting how big of a struggle it's been over the past 10 years now.
Yeah. So the How Not to Start a Backpack Company is sort of centered, that's the title of the book, is sort of centered around the trip I took in the summer of 2010. I was in between years at business school, and I drove to all 48 states. I'd made it up in my mind that was what we were going to do. We were going to visit a lot of small retail shops, and we're going to meet people and get into adventures and sort of blog about it. That was the plan. And it was really, really hard. The plan was bad. It didn't work out. I sold nothing. I went completely broke. Everybody who was with me left except for my dog. And I was fighting with my then to be future ex-wife, whatever, right? About who's going to get to keep the dog. So that was excruciating. I was kind of going through a divorce officially anyway, finalizing one at the time. And it was really hard. And yet this trip that I took throughout America was really beautiful. It was just awesome. And so you've got this just complete contrast of, kind of putting a veneer on my life a little bit, but it was also kind of easy, right? Because there's so many great people out there, and there's so much beauty and so many beautiful places that'll just lift you up from nothing. And yet my own life is just burning down to the ground. And I've got this company that's just putting all this pressure on me. Well, let me say that again. The company is helping me put pressure on myself, right? Let's take responsibility here.
Right. Sure.
And so that was just a it was just a challenge. And I kind of knew I wasn't going to do that again, but it's still at the same time, like maybe, I mean, Travels with Charlie is a Steinbeck book and it's awesome. And it's about how he wanted to go out and rediscover America later in life and stuff like that. And those are hugely inspiring. Road trips, who doesn't, I mean, a good road trip's awesome. A good trip, awesome. Go out west, young man, you know?
Yeah.
Go find yourself. And I was looking to find myself. The problem is when you're lost trying to go find yourself by driving to a new town every day is a good way to kind of escape the problem, which probably is going to breed more problems that you're going to have to deal with if you actually want to find yourself. So there's a little bit of that going on as well.
Do you feel like you did find yourself, or at least give yourself some direction or clarity, purpose? Like, what is it that you walked away from as you went on this trip across the country?
I felt like I didn't quit. And I felt like doing something was a lot better than doing nothing, like sitting in an apartment feeling sorry for myself.
Right.
So as you start to say, well, what do you do when times are tough? I mean, I had to go to the well a little bit more than I had hoped for, like the personal well, you know, because I had some really dear friends that were with me on the trip, one of whom took all the best photos that are in the book and was the editor of the book, right? So we're very much, you know, like things are good. It's just at the time it was just a real challenge, and it was difficult with the people, and because the situation was difficult and I was kind of built for that to a certain extent, right? Like I was trying to relive some type of Spartan special forces life, except on the road, and demanding that everybody do that. And the only one that was comfortable with that was Java, my dog. Right. And so, you know, did I find myself? No. But what I did do was I just kind of kept going, and that unlocked some more doors, right? Because if you sit at home and feel sorry for yourself, things have a tendency of just not working out. It's not like you're cursed or something. It's just, if you fish more, you'll catch more fish.
Right.
And so
it's just time in the field, essentially, is what it is.
Yeah, you know, so, you know, some of the things, the mechanics that I learned how to do were, first off, I learned how to kind of talk about GoRuck, because I was going to these stores. I was trying to communicate the brand and the brand values. And so that was good practice. I learned how to take photos. I was taking so many photos to try to get 2 or 3 or 4 a day. I mean, 1,000 photos sometimes a day.
Wow. Yeah.
Like,
just to get those 3
insane.
just right ones. Sure.
Yeah. Cause I had nothing else to do. Right. And I don't, you know, idle hands and stuff. So it's like, you know, this is too beautiful. So I had a Nikon at the time, like a D70 or D80. No, maybe it was a D90 by the end of that. But, you know, trying to learn that, I mean, I didn't know anything. Right. And the camera will do a lot of the work for you. But, you know, recently it's Rich, who's on our podcast from time to time as one of the co-hosts. And Rich is a little bit older. Also, don't mess with him, right? But, you know, his wife needed a portrait for her new job, right, that she started. And he comes in and he's like, hey, do you have this other camera here? And I'm like, no, it's at home. And he's like, well, I've been trying to, that sucks because I need to take a picture of Nancy and my iPhone isn't doing the trick. And I'm like, Rich, it's not the iPhone that's the problem, bud. It's you.
That's right. It's always, would you rather have the skill set or the tool? You always want the skill set.
Yeah, exactly. And so I did have a different camera, and I did use that. And I took a picture of his wife, Nancy, and it turned out great. But the point is like, you know, just because I had an expensive camera didn't mean that it was going to work for me. I mean, right. Inside in the dark is a lot different than outside in the middle of the day, and all these kinds of things. So learned how to do that, you know, did end up talking to a lot of stores that were in retail, you know, went out and just, you know, it was somehow the story tells better as I think about it than when I actually remember the details that I put in the book, you know, because the details in the book were a journal that just lived forever.
Right.
And so it really painted the picture of a lot of the struggles. So the short answer is no, I didn't find myself. The long answer is that it opened up a lot of communication channels. You know, I reached out to a lot of people. I was forced to, because this company was just failing. So I reached out to literally everybody that I knew at the time and said, hey, I've started this company. I need your help. Will you support me? That's a really hard thing to do.
Definitely.
And if you're not willing to do it, then you're not ready to start a company. And
Right.
like,
I mean,
or you're not ready to succeed at a company.
yeah,
right?
you can start for sure.
Yeah,
Yes.
starting is easy. You go on
Yes.
LegalZoom and file the paperwork. It's not a
Right.
problem. Right.
Yeah.
But so there's certain things that I just had to get comfortable with. And I had this problem of I didn't want to overstep my bounds of my past. I was just completely unwilling to bring any shame upon the special forces community that I came from. And so I had to kind of make my
What were
peace with
you?
that. And
Well, I want to interject here because that's an interesting thought. What do you think might have been overstepping your bounds? Like, what exactly were you afraid of or concerned with your previous organization and affiliation?
yeah, so there's just certain things you shouldn't do. Like you shouldn't look ridiculous ever. Right. And so you shouldn't make a mockery and run. So there was a company that was another events company, and they liked the fact that I was a special forces guy, and they had this proposal that they gave me that I was going to show up at their events and lead these small groups of people with big flags running all over the place. And I was going to wear Ranger panties and sort of sing songs and stuff about, special forces and stuff. And I was just appalled by the thought, the
Yes.
thought of not only just seeing myself doing that, which I will never do, but the thought of my buddies seeing that I went to war with,
Right.
right? Seeing me do that now, there's lots of things that you can do in this world with your life. And, you don't have to do things that will bring shame upon yourself and every organization that you've been a part of. And I just wasn't willing to do that. And like, because I can imagine if I would see one of my buddies doing that, like, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah. It's funny because I actually had a somewhat similar scenario when I got back from Iraq. I got into the financial planning field. So this was 2006. And as I was building my financial planning practice, I had a mentor come to me one day and he said, "Hey, I wanted to talk with you about your military service." I said, "Sure, yeah, what's up?" And the reason he wanted to talk with me about it is because he wanted me to use it as a marketing tactic for growing my financial planning firm. He's like, "You need to talk about it more. You need to talk about it in this context." And he wanted to be really gimmicky, similar to what you're saying. And I said, "Look, I'm not going to do that. Could I sell more insurance or pick up more assets? Yeah, probably. I could probably do that. But I didn't join the military and I didn't serve so that I could make a few more bucks off of people." And so I can definitely appreciate and relate with what you're saying here. It is interesting because I have seen people sell out, for lack of a better term, and they look ridiculous and they bring shame in a lot of ways to something that I think is very honorable and noble.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily take away from their service, but it's not a good
No.
look. And I've
Right.
seen it too, and I stay away from those people and those organizations because I don't want to be associated with them. If you'll do anything for a buck, you'll do anything for lots of things.
Yes.
And it's kind of like that's the kind of person you are then. And so,
Right.
there are a lot more important things to me than money and, honor, duty, country, respect, integrity, all those kinds of things. And nobody's perfect. And I'm not sitting here claiming to be. I'm just saying that I at that time and still until my dying breath will have this debt that I owe to the Special Forces Regiment. And, that's kind of at a really elevated level, right? At a really tactical level. It's like, I think about the guys that I knew very well that I served with. And
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like, sure, you serve America, you serve Special Forces, but you're really serving the guy to your left and the guy to your right. And they're the ultimate check for me. And so they were involved. Some of those guys were involved with, early testing of GoRuck stuff. And, they've just been in my corner. And if they hadn't been in my corner, I would have gotten, the way it works is you get blacklisted and then nobody wants to work with you that's any good. And you only get the people that are willing to put on tutus and sing Special Forces songs. And those aren't the guys that you want because nobody takes them seriously, because then you have guys like you and me on this call who are like, that's not a good look, man. Right.
Right.
And
Right.
yet, one caveat is sometimes, people are just lost, and that sucks. And if someone is going down a path, and I don't mean put on a tutu and sing songs or whatever, but if someone's going down a path and you served with them and you knew them and you have a personal connection, like we all can reserve the right to call them up and ask them to go grab a beer or go for a ruck or go do whatever and just chat about life and see where they are. Because a lot of times people get desperate and they have this need to do something, and opportunities present themselves. So, look, it's a sliding scale. We're kind of getting into the hypothetical realm here a lot, but it's like, I just want to try to set a good example, and I want to make the guys that I serve with proud.
Yeah. No, I mean, it makes sense. I like that you're also talking about doing something, because I think there's a lot of men who tend to get paralyzed. I answer questions every day from guys who are like, I want to start this thing, or I've got a bunch of different avenues that I want to pursue, and I don't know which one to do. And, I wish there was a perfect formula, but for me, it's like, just start, just pick something.
Here's
and take
the formula.
Next step.
Here's the formula.
Let's hear it. Yeah.
The best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is right now.
Right.
And it's
yesterday's gone.
You just got to do it, man. I mean, and so part of the story that I wanted to share, because I see a lot of these kind of stories that are presented as people who just have it figured out, right? Like, I couldn't find a good dress shirt, so I started my own dress shirt company. It's like, man, you can go to a tailor and get custom dress shirts for very little money now, right? I mean, it's like, the idea that you couldn't find a dress shirt is just not reality,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
But you saw a business opportunity, but you didn't want to present it like that. And, now it's all slick and polished and perfect. And you're kind of this avatar example of how to start a great business, quote, quote.
Mm-hmm.
And look, not to take anything away from shirt companies. There's some great ones out there, right? but the point is that I didn't have anything figured out. I mean, I had a bag that nobody wanted to buy. And it was like, hey, I'm going to do this. It's a hobby. I didn't really think about the money as much as I was trying to solve a problem. And then I kept kind of doubling down, and I kept not knowing how to do it more and more and more. And you can't keep doing that forever. I don't recommend that path. But the idea of, you have to just get started. That's kind of that hopefully my story can be kind of a push for people to say, it's okay. You don't have to have the perfect business plan. By the way, mine was terrible and I threw it up. Or sorry, I threw it away. I threw up thinking about it, so I threw it away. Right. And so it's just one of those things where, it doesn't have to be perfect. You just got to get going. And you got to solve it along the way.
Yeah, I think that's a more realistic picture. It has been for me. I don't even have a business plan. I just started this thing, and I'm like, yeah, I'll just do a podcast and we'll see how it goes. And, before I knew it, I'm like, oh, this is going pretty good. Maybe we'll do an event. We actually did an event and nobody signed up, not a single person. And I had to go back to the drawing board. I had to call the company that was hosting the property for us, tell them, hey, I don't have anybody signed up for this event. I went back to the drawing board 3-4 months later. We had 20 guys sign up for that first event. All right, man, let's try again for round 2, because obviously we had some technical difficulties. I think I was sharing a story, and I think I finished up and wrapped up the story. But one thing I was going to say, because you talked about not knowing, right? That's kind of where we were, is not knowing how to do this, not having a game plan. And I've thought and told a lot of people this is, it's okay to be ignorant about something, but it's not okay to stay that way. And I think a lot of people stay there, right? They just, hey, I don't know how to do this. And so they just throw in the towel. It's like, no, I don't know how to do this, comma, not period. I will figure it out. And that's what you've done, I think.
About the same things, right? You don't want to stay ignorant about the same things, because you do want to keep finding new stuff,
learning
that you're
new things.
Ignorant and learning, and, throw yourself in the deep water sometime and figure out how to swim. And yet there's another component to that, though, that is, if something is too bad for too long, you might want to do something else with your life. It's not quitting, guys, right? Like, it's not, it's just, if something is you keep trying, you keep flanking a million different ways, and you're pouring your heart into something. It's like, if I wanted to go be a singer, right? As much as my heart might want to do that, it is not going to happen.
Not happening.
Right? It is not going to happen. I can clear out a bar faster than anyone, you know, even karaoke with the full background beat going solid. And it's just one of those things. Look, it's like, but if you really love something, then make it a labor of love. And if you can build a business around it, then cool. You know, it's just, there's too much emphasis placed on outcomes. Well, if I get to this many followers, or I get to this many bank account numbers, or I get this many likes, or like, what's the point? What's the point? Right? I mean, is this so that, ask yourself that question. If you're going through something, I mean, the outcomes that you're after, that's a lot different than the process that you love. And for me, I mean, I enjoy solving new problems and challenges, but I don't want to solve it for, you know, bank A wants to acquire bank B, and how do we get the highest value out of that? That's just, I did that for about a year, or I was a low-level support guy for that for about a year. And that just wasn't where my passion was. And so now it's more about, how do we bring people together and get people more active? And how do we get a lot more people and bring a lot more people together to be a lot more active? And so, yeah.
I was going to ask, did you ever consider throwing in the towel? I mean, I'm sure that crossed your mind, but was there ever a point where this was seriously like, hey, if I don't do this, or if this doesn't come together, we're kind of at a point where I might need to consider quitting, or however you want to phrase it, and moving on to the next part of your life?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't ever really have that talk. Now, realize life was just, there were other life circumstances. So there was a little bit of a clock ticking, and the clock ticking was, I was in business school. Okay. So because of the graciousness of the American taxpayer, I had to post 9/11 GI Bill. So I was not going into debt on that front, and had a little bit of cash coming in, so to say, right? For you know, incidentals and stuff like that. And so that bought me some time. And so between 2009 and 2011, I was in school essentially moonlighting on GoRuck. And then I took the whole summer off and went on the cross country trip. But I never really had that talk. Like, if this number doesn't hit, then I'm going to have to not do it. For me, it was more like, I didn't really think that I wanted to run a quote backpack company. And so I just didn't. You know, yes, we sell rucksacks or backpacks, but if that's what it took for me to do that, to run GoRuck, or to be an entrepreneur, a businessman, whatever you want to call it, like I was unwilling to do that. I wanted to do something a little bit different. And the thing that kept calling me, the original plan for my wife and I was going to join her in the CIA. Right. And so, you know, coincidentally, through her, I met all of the people, because I'd been through the hiring process, and it became clear that I needed to go join special operations first before I could go to the CIA. Well, she joined the CIA a year after I joined special forces or so. Right. And so I met all of the people who were the hirers, and they were in the special activities division, so the paramilitary arm of the CIA. And that's 99% of the battle, you know, like getting your foot in the door. And so that was kind of staring at me. And I'm living in DC, which is a very kind of government military style town at its core. If you're in that world at all, it feels like it, you know, there's
right. I bet.
And I wanted to continue to make a really big difference for my country. And so it didn't seem like selling backpacks was going to be all that great or all that important. And I knew a lot of people who were going out and doing God's work for America, and I wanted to do that. And so it was more that I just was very torn on the deepest, most existential level possible, whether this is actually what I wanted to do. And so GoRuck was a hobby, which is kind of a slow death if you're an entrepreneur. Now, it can buy you some time if you don't have to ramp up the costs, and you can kind of test the waters a little bit. Like, I recommend 2 jobs, 1 paycheck for as long as you can do it, right? Moonlight. Guess what? Because the world is not just waiting for you to start your company. No. It's just not a thing. The world is not, it is not beating down your door. This is not a thing. And so you need to figure it out a little bit. And that's to your earlier question about, did I find myself? And I figured some stuff out. And that, I figured out that this could be about more than selling bags. I just didn't know yet how that could go. And I still had a little bit of time. And so, the clock that was ticking was school. And I didn't view it as quicksand, but I was just kind of at a deep level unsatisfied with the idea of being a backpack company in some office somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can definitely appreciate you going from being in the special forces to now I'm selling a product, right? Even though that's not what it is, I could see how you might believe that that's the case. And so now that you have this larger mission in place, it seems like there's much more satisfaction and fulfillment in that, as opposed to I'm going to sell some bags.
Yeah, I mean, it's all the mission and all the fulfillment. I mean, people are the most important part of your life. Whoever you are, they're the most important. And so, it sounds too easy to just say focus on people if you want to have a fulfilling career, but it's true. I mean, if you go watch a movie like Wall Street or something, which is still true, like how many yachts do you need to jet ski behind or water ski behind, right? I mean, all these things, I mean, it's never enough. And you talk to old people. Like I think grandparents are the greatest race of people on the planet, right? I mean, so much wisdom. It just stuff doesn't bother them. They have a lot of perspective. And you meet these people, they've been varying degrees of success, and it's the relationships that they have that they think about the most and they're the most proud of, and that they usually wish they had spent even more time on those. And so I'm cognizant of that. And it's really hard still, because if left to my own devices, I will lock myself in a room and get to work and just keep pounding. And so the balance in life is kind of the eternal struggle.
Well, and the thing that I like that you're talking about is really just enjoying the process, because if it is for some destination, for example, I hear people talk about, on a Monday, they're like, oh, I can't wait for the weekend. I'm like, okay, well, the weekend comes and goes and then you're back to it. And so then what? You wait for the next weekend? Like, what about the other 80% of the week that you have to live? And all you're living for is the last 20% of it. And then it ends and it goes away. And then you're back to the beginning.
Yeah, I remember people say, well, I have a job I'm in, I'm a pressman or I'm in construction or whatever. How am I supposed to love that job? I mean, my dad's been a pressman for as old as I am, 41 years, right? And he likes the guys that he works with, the guys and gals that he works with, they've got their sort of camaraderie at the office and they care, right? So they care about the quality of the work that comes out. But, the people in construction, Goodwill Hunting style, right? I mean, just make it fun.
Right.
I don't know anywhere like being in the Army, guess what? It's not that fun all the time. And in fact, it doesn't have to be fun to be fun. It's about the people that you're there with. And you can do that in any type of situation where there are other people. And so that's the trick. And then, yes, it's hard work. Everybody's life is hard work. And so, hoping that your life's going to be easy or somehow that easy is better. Like, first off, you're hoping for the wrong thing. Second off, it won't be. So there's a lot of recalibration that's required. And just look, if you hate the people that you work with, if you don't believe in them, if you don't believe in the mission at all, then find a new profession that you don't have to hate so much to only live for the weekends and vacation and escapism. Because you need to be present. And there's a way to be present and fulfilled and happy with what you're doing if you're around people that you enjoy.
Definitely. I did want to ask you about something, since I knew we were going to have this conversation, because you made a little bit of waves last year with your choice of some of your manufacturing product, shipping that overseas. I'm really curious because I read some articles and have different perspectives. I think I know why you made that decision, but I'm really curious from your perspective what went into that decision, because that must have been a tough call to make.
Yeah, it's a very complicated situation. Manufacturing, stop me if I go down the rabbit hole too far, but manufacturing is kind of let's start with where it will eventually be. It will eventually be robots sewing stuff together. There will be very, very little human labor that goes into this. It's like autonomous driving cars. If you think that your great grandchildren are going to have the opportunity to be Uber drivers ever, like it's just not going to happen, right? So this class of people that are getting this work now, like they're further financing a distancing from like that way. Not that that's necessarily, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, are those the jobs that we necessarily want, or do we want to focus on other things? Anyway, with manufacturing, this is going to happen. You see it in a lot of places. Like think about how much more automation there is in car factories. I went and toured Surefire headlamps, like the flashlight company, right? About a decade ago, maybe 2011. And there's a guy walking around with a clipboard. Everything is being done with machinery. And so that is going to happen. The more automation that happens in manufacturing, it's not like, I'm not sitting here saying that's for better or for worse. I'm just saying it's going to happen. Okay. So let's just take that as an assumption. And we say, okay, so now you've got so much more capital investment. Now realize GoRuck's really small in the manufacturing world, right? When you think about small companies, we're a small company. When you look at the places who are doing the sewing, right? The most work is being done overseas. And so what happens is that those places make significantly higher capital investments in manufacturing. They make significantly larger machine investments in manufacturing. And so over time, what happens is that it is less, it's more precise, if you will. If 50% of the bag is, hey, you lay the fabric out, you cut it with lasers perfectly, right? And there's all sorts of, everything is cut perfectly, and it's just more automated throughout the process. It makes it easier to sew these things. Those are talking millions of dollars of machines to do over and over and over again.
No doubt. Sure.
Now, American manufacturing is, some places have that, but there is not growth of American manufacturing because there is not supply growth of people who want to sew. The only people, and this is like, let's pull the curtain back, the only people who are sewing at scale in any of the factories I've ever been are first generation Americans. They're immigrants, and God bless them because they work their asses off, right? I mean, the immigrant class is one that I hugely support. And I think it's America doing what we do best, right? The great melting pot. That said, there is this problem where the factory owners are unable to grow because the step-up costs are so high, right? The step-up costs of massive capital investments coupled with labor that's 10 times higher. And that's probably not the right number, but it's significantly higher. Now, it's like, can we make fewer, better stuff in America? We have master craftsmen here. We have people who can make as good of stuff as anywhere on the planet. Like, we have that. It's not dead. When you start to say, hey, for a business to diversify its manufacturing and to bring on kind of a compete, if you will, in a different sector, right? So GoRuck is straddling this line between the everyday carry kind of that world, which can heavily lean on American manufacturing and fitness, right? And the fitness side of the house is a lot more competitive. And the prices, we're already seeing it. There are people coming on who are building stuff for rucking, and they're not doing it in America. And eventually, as we promote and build and grow rucking, we're kind of the tip of the spear on this. We have to make sure that we're not just completely undercut by someone else coming on and knocking off all our stuff and offering it at, a third the price, like say Arctic did to Yeti or whatever the case may be, right? So then you can kind of say, okay, well, why don't you just keep the high ground on the manufacturing front? And it's like, we are. I mean, the quality of the stuff that's happening, I'm not going to say it's better overseas. I'm going to say that if I want to build, it's easier to scale quality overseas at the right places. Like saying overseas manufacturing is kind of like saying, I know someone in Germany named Wolf. Have you met him? Right? I mean, there's so many different kinds of overseas manufacturing. And the place that we're in is, I mean, it's a tier 1 place. I mean, huge capital investments. It's almost like a city unto itself, right? I mean, the workers come, there's lunch, there's dinner, whatever the case may be, right? Or breakfast and lunch rather. And so, it's really messy, man. Like there's lots of trade-offs, and some people will say you should have kept everything in America here till forever. I mean, I will say 38% cost increase to us in not a long period of time. That's what happened on the American side. That is because there is not enough. The industry is not in a great position, right?
Well, I'm sure it's even worse with COVID.
To scale. Oh yeah, and now you look at COVID, right? So I believe that circling back to the original part of what's going to happen is increased automation of manufacturing. If people are nostalgic for one person building your thing from start to finish, that will happen. If you look at something like Levi's has this program where you take their 501s and they take your measurements and they will build it from start to finish for you, like a guy or a small team.
Sure.
Or you look at like Beck Boots in Amarillo, Texas, which was a place I visited in 2010. They literally send you a last kit for your foot. You send them, you stand in their last kit. They make your last, they keep your last on file in Amarillo, Texas, and they make your boot out of the last that's specifically designed for your foot. That will always continue to be there. That will be extremely high priced with extreme amounts of craftsmanship, right?
Right. It's no longer a commodity at that point. That's a specialty item that somebody's willing to pay and invest for.
Yes. And that will always be around. And that might even be around at higher scale, right? But for us, when you start to look at, okay, so we need to be able to scale the highest quality rucking gear on the planet. It cannot break, it has to perform. Well, what we saw was what happens in another 10 years when costs go up even more this time, right? Mm-hmm. What's going to happen then? And so we still have a lot of manufacturing in the US. We have some overseas. Right now, volume-wise, we have a lot overseas as well, and we have a lot of dollar value in America with not as much in inventory units-wise. Now, the other part is when you look at COVID, what happened was a lot of the manufacturers started chasing the PPE stuff, right? Because all of a sudden there's this big demand, and rightfully so. And they got shut down, or they volunteered to not work for periods of months, right? And that would have just crushed us. And so meanwhile, we were able to do a lot of, like, say, our sandbags, right? Sandbags, high demand item since the beginning of COVID. People can work out in their garage. They can work out with them anywhere, right? It's great, functional.
Sure.
I've been working a lot of sandbag stuff in my garage, my front yard, invite my buddies over. We have more sandbags. I mean, we could scale up our sandbag stuff in 3 months at levels that would take us forever to get there in America, right? And so there's kind of it's not a safety net. It's a diversification of manufacturing. And we're having to revisit some of that because the demand curve for some of our stuff is hugely different now. The training and fitness gear. So some people would say, okay, well, that was hugely damaging for your brand. Well, I'm sure there's a niche of people who would say that. I will say, and the volume of buyers is not necessarily the only litmus test of where the brand is,
Right.
but the fitness gear that we have sold exceedingly well since COVID started has been the stuff that's been built overseas, along with US made ruck plates, right? So the weights that go in the rucks have all sold really, really well. The rucker, the sandbag, and ruck plates. That has been what we have done the most volume of since COVID started. And so when you start to look at GR1, GR2, GR3, GR1 still does really well because it's kind of like since the beginning, and it's just a multi-tool of
Right.
tough, right?
Right. It's just the original. Sure.
There are certain items that we're going to bring back and make exclusively in the States, and that's good. I feel really good about that. Right now, we've got to kind of work through some other stuff until that happens. But there is actually a really good strategy. Like the fitness and the training stuff, that stuff's all going to be built it's going to be built overseas. And we have a great partner that builds really high quality stuff. And we've done a lot of, so let me put this in perspective. I'll give you one more anecdote. There is a sample room at our factory outside Saigon in Vietnam. The sample room, which is integrated with an R&D center, if you will, which they can do patterns and make pattern changes and do all of that. The sample room has 130 sewers. Okay. That is enormous.
That's a bit,
our first factory that we built rucksacks in America probably had 20 sewers, and a lot of them were home sewers. Okay. The next place that we went that we were with for years and years, and we keep going up in places that have higher quality, higher standards, and coincidentally, more automation. So it's all of it is what you keep looking for. And then those ones become in really high demand. You can always go backwards and say, sure, we could have gone back to some of the places that we were with a long time ago and said, we want these huge orders, and they'll take it. But that would be a reduction in our standards, right?
Sure.
And you have to retrain people, and it's really hard. But the next place that we went to and were there for 5 years out in Seattle probably have about 100 sewers, 100 line sewers. And it's like, that's what the sample room is at our place in Saigon. So the ability to kind of make changes and perfect things and perfect patterns and test, it happens so much faster. Like the sample room and the place where we're at right now in America, it's a part-time sewer.
Right.
Like one.
How can you scale that? Of course. Sure.
So then you have your own R&D center, and they're doing stuff, and they do, but our R&D center on the ruck side, the sewer part is 2 people, right? And it's full time, mind you. But there's just if you tweak something the wrong way, it's kind of, you've got to test that for a bit. And then when it's not quite right, then you got to test it again. Whereas we can say, hey, send me 6, make this change 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I want to test this at, 2 millimeters, 4 millimeters, and 6 millimeters. And they will send it, and we will label them 2, 4, 6. And then you test them and you see, okay, well, this one works better over weight, time, and distance. And you say, okay, this one's the go. And you test them. It just accelerates things. So it's not just about, lower the cost, right? Lower the cost.
That's what everybody thinks.
We have done nothing but increase our costs of American manufacturing since we've started, intentionally, mind you. We've gone to better places, and those better places, even with higher automation, have charged more because they have to make back their capital investments on their infrastructure. It's messy, man.
Right.
It's really messy, and it's really nuanced. And it's like, I can sit here and wave a flag and say, I love America and I love American manufacturing, because I do. And we build more now in America than we built in the first, 5 years of our existence, And this is just what it takes sometimes to make hard decisions out of business.
Well, and I think the fascinating thing with this too, Jason, is that what we're talking about here wraps into what you were saying earlier, which is you're figuring it out, right? And that's the cost of doing business, is not knowing the direction, not knowing the path, trying this, experimenting here, tweaking this, adjusting that, fixing this mistake, doubling down on this thing that went well, and you're figuring out the path. And this is what people and men need to understand, is that it isn't all going to lay out itself before you. It's not like the red carpet. It just rolls out everywhere you step. It's like you got to lay the framework itself.
Yeah, so, okay, exactly. And so then I'll take the counter position to this, which is there is absolutely a place for American manufacturing. And it's this, because we learned this. We had to learn this the hard way. The MOQs, the minimum order quantities of the stuff that we get from Vietnam, it's 1,000 units.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that means you have to build 1,000 and then you have to sell the 1,000 or else you're just carrying inventory.
Right. Then you have inventory. Sure.
Right. And so it doesn't allow you to do things like new colors or like change stuff with small runs and get creative like that. So then you say, okay, well, what's the MOQ? What's the minimums out of America? Well, the MOQs for us are 80 out of America. So we can do certain things here and we can do it better and faster. And because the lead times are less here as well. Right. So then you say, okay, so 3 months here versus more over there. Because then it's got to be on a boat for a month after they get the fat. It's longer. So you're looking at 4, 5, sometimes 6 months from overseas, which requires bigger bets on inventory, right? You've got to bet, you've got to forecast, you've got to make bigger bets. And then you've got to sell it once it comes in, or else you're sitting on inventory. Well, guess what? Right now, we're still sitting on some inventory that we ordered in the first run of stuff that came from Vietnam. Not because it's bad, but because we just missed the demand curve.
So many, yeah.
And we had to order so much to kind of get started with that factory. So now we're kind of getting into this zen that we see of we went too far here. We pulled back too much in America. COVID took everything. It's like chaos,
Scrambling
it's
all
like,
together.
It's like from Batman Begins, right? Where the Joker's like, introduce a little chaos and everyone goes crazy, right? And so, but what we're seeing is we feel the dust settling and how we are going to manage the business. And we made some big bets and we made some big mistakes like that. But we always kept our true north, which was this is quality gear. It comes with a lifetime guarantee, and it's going to work. And so what we're going to have is this blend of the American stuff we're able to do some different stuff with because it's lower quantities and shorter lead times, whereas overseas is more of the training stuff, which we're getting an enormous tailwind behind. And so, you start to say, okay, that's a little bit easier to make bigger bets. Yeah. And we're just seeing that side. And so how to blend those, guess what, guys? It's hard. It's not easy. We don't want it to be easy because if it were, anyone could do it. And so we're having to figure stuff out. And just like, it's not like we're just finding ourselves. Like you don't just go to the mountaintop like Moses and come back down with all the answers and just tell the disciples. It doesn't work like that. You're always trying to find the next peak. You're always trying to climb higher. Sometimes you got to go down the first peak a little bit to find the valley to get back up next to the next peak. And you've got to live with yourself in that valley. And sometimes it sucks, man, but you've got to just keep looking up and be grateful for the people that are around you. And then you got to get back to climbing. And so that's where we are. I mean, I will tell you just to a certain extent, COVID kind of made us seem a little bit smarter than we actually are. It's been a big accident that it just kind of made it very clear to us what we needed to do on the manufacturing front because demand curves and just the nature of where the growth was and is coming from. So it actually made life in some ways more focused for us. And focus is a blessing.
Yeah. It's powerful, man. I love it.
So that's a long-winded answer. Did I answer your question?
It's good because I think the lesson is, obviously a lot of the guys that listen to this are not in manufacturing necessarily, but I think the lesson here is what we said is that it's messy, right? You sometimes you do it right, sometimes you do it wrong. It's probably a combination of both, and you just keep figuring it out, and that's the solution. You just keep going, keep moving along, and you'll start to work it out.
Yeah, don't compromise your core principles in that because, if I'm putting a tutu on singing Special Forces songs, that's compromising my core principles.
Right.
Integrity, respect, honor your roots. Stuff like that, right? But, some stuff you've got to just venture out. And sometimes you got to do it alone. Hopefully you can bring your team with you. but there's no other way to do it. You just got to venture out. You got to get going. You got to just get started and get after it. You will make mistakes. Man. It will happen.
Oh, it will.
Just brace for it and figure out what's next after you lick your wounds a little bit.
Absolutely. Brother, I appreciate you coming on and talking about it. Guys, go pick up a copy of the book. It's a completely different book than what you're used to. It's not like a self-help thing, but it just talks about the realness of your journey, which is what I really appreciated about it, and the fact of what you're talking about today. So, man, Jason, I appreciate you. Looking forward to seeing what you guys continue to do and be involved to some degree. Thanks a lot for joining us, man.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.